What is an engine overhaul? What does it involve when your mechanic says that you need to get your engine overhauled? And should you even be overhauling your engine? Today I want to be talking about engine overhauls. What are some of the details about what goes into an engine overhaul, and why there's a big problem with modern engines and having to overhaul the engine. 95% of the time you find that it doesn't work, and even when you bring your cars here to us at TuneX Automotive, if it has any issues that end up requiring an overhaul, we always suggest that you just get a new engine, and I'm going to tell you in this video a few reasons why that is. To start off, let's talk about what are the reasons why you might need to have your engine overhauled. Well, the first common reason why is that your engine starts to smoke. If you haven't seen my smoking video, there are different types of engine smoke, but basically when your mechanic is able to diagnose that your piston rings have failed and your engine is burning oil, that's mainly the reason why you would end up having to overhaul your engine. Another reason why you might end up overhauling your engine is if you have a situation where your engine overheated and you have what is called a head gasket failure. So when a head gasket fails, again I mentioned this in my engine smoke type video, you have the engine burning coolant, and obviously that also affects the combustion system, so your engine won't be making as much power as it normally would if you didn't have a blown head gasket. So if you have a blown head gasket, then your mechanic might also suggest that you just have the engine overhauled. So now here are a few of the biggest problems that we have when it comes to overhauling engines. I think engine overhauls were much easier back in the day because of the design of the engines back then and the materials that were used when building the engines. So for example, when you look at this engine right here, which is a 2SZ, this engine is found in some of the older Toyota Vitz. Even the Toyota Belter has this engine in it. This engine came with what is called a cast iron block. So the material that was used to make the block of the engine was cast iron. And basically what we have today is newer engines, like for example the 1KR, which everybody calls the disposable engine. That engine is built all aluminium, so you've got an aluminium head and you also have an aluminium block. I can also give this BMW engine for an example. I believe this is an N47 diesel engine. So this engine is actually built with an aluminium head and an aluminium block. But when it comes to diesel engines will normally be sleeved. So what I mean when we say that an engine has sleeves is basically it can be built with the head and the block being aluminium, but where the cylinders are concerned, you have sleeves, which are basically round cylinders that are slotted into the block, and those are made of cast iron. And that's because diesel engines work at very, very high pressures, pressures that don't really accommodate the aluminium blocks that the engines are made of. So they will put a sleeve in there so that you're still able to manage that high pressure, but also get the benefits of having an aluminium engine. So just to give you a better example, when I talk about sleeving an engine, this is a 3RZ engine, but this actually doesn't have sleeves because it's a full cast iron block. But at least we get the view of what the cylinders look like on the inside. So for example, the N47 diesel engine, which is this one right here, what you would have is the block is an aluminium block, but then what you have here on the cylinders themselves are sleeves. So sleeves would be able to be removed and you can put in new sleeves. So a lot of car manufacturers moved from using cast iron to aluminium because aluminium is very lightweight. For example, if I show you this is a part of an S55 engine. It's supposed to be at the bottom of the block. This is where your crankshaft is supposed to sit. So this is made out of aluminium, and you can see very lightweight. I can carry this with one hand, no problem. So this is one of the main reasons why car manufacturers moved from using cast iron to aluminium. Very lightweight, but also it manages heat very well. So when it comes to keeping your engine at a constant temperature, which is what your engine needs, these aluminium blocks, or parts of the block that are aluminum, make it very easy for your engine to manage its temperatures very well. So while aluminum is lightweight and manages the thermals very well on an engine, it's also a very sensitive material to work on. So that's why a lot of machine shops here in Zambia have a problem when it comes to working on engines that are all aluminum. That's an aluminum head and an aluminum block, because this material is very sensitive to heat. Doing any work on it can cause it to have warpage, or just have defects on the different surfaces because of heat. And also it's very sensitive to what materials you use when you're machining this. You need to use very specific materials, otherwise you get things like cracking and some scoring on the different parts. So aluminum is just a very sensitive material to work on as compared to the cast iron blocks. When it came to the cast iron blocks, it was very easy to machine them. They didn't react very much to heat, so you wouldn't have situations where you have to be constantly oiling the part as you're machining it. It would be able to just be machined, and you find that the cast iron block is okay. But when it comes to aluminum, very sensitive material to work on, and that's one of the biggest problems that comes in when you try to overhaul or rebuild an engine that has an aluminum block. Here in Zambia, it's like tossing a coin, honestly, if you're going to go and do an engine overhaul, because when you're doing an engine overhaul, a lot of mechanics will simply go and buy a kit that has your head gasket, your different seals that you will need. You have your piston rings, your rod bearings, and all that. The kit will have all those things, but one part that a lot of mechanics miss is the machining part. That's Zico, our cat here at the shop. One thing a lot of mechanics miss is the machining part. So if you don't take your engine to a machine shop, and that is a well qualified machine shop, then it's just guesswork. So at the end of the day, for some people, there are some testimonies that it has worked, but I can tell you that 90% of the time when you take your engine to a machine shop, they don't cut things into spec, as far as whether it's the cylinder bores, whether it's leveling the head. There are so many things that can be missed. I remember when I was working on my Honda engine, doing the rebuild on that, I took the head for skimming, which is basically taking the head to make it flat again, because when your engine overheats, it ends up getting warped. And basically what warping is just a deformity on the flatness of the head, the engine head. So now when I took it to this machine shop and they skimmed my head, I asked them, by how much did you have to skim the head? Because you have to know what that figure is. There is a certain limit to which you can skim an engine head, or even brake discs, because also brake discs are taken for skimming. There's a certain limit to that. So if you don't know that limit, you can skim the head, and that material that you've taken off can actually cause problems for you if you don't know how much you've taken off, because you might affect the clearance of the valves to the pistons. So you find that once your head has been skimmed, the valves are actually getting closer to where the piston is, and you can actually get engine damage that way. So it's just things like that. Like, the machine shop is supposed to know how much material they've taken off, but they'll just tell you, oh, they've skimmed, and just have you go with that. So that's why you get a lot of people rebuilding their engines. You find that you rebuilt your engine. For example, your engine was smoking, you rebuilt it, and then after a few months you find that your engine is smoking again. So that can be caused by things like, for example, honing. The engine wasn't done. So you buy new piston rings and you find that the engine's cylinders were glazed, and that's like where your engine cylinders have like a mirror finish. When you look inside the cylinders, you can tell that the cylinder walls are very smooth. They're actually not supposed to be like that, and that's why there's a process called honing, which creates like a cross pattern on your cylinder walls. And what that cross pattern does is it catches some of the engine oil that is sprayed on the cylinder walls. So even as the piston goes down and it wipes off most of the oil that's on the cylinder walls, there's just a little bit of it that is supposed to be able to stay on the cylinder walls, and that's what that crosshatch does. and allows your engine to have that bit of lubrication for the piston rings. It doesn't need to be running, the piston rings don't need to be running on dry walls. So if you buy yourself a rebuild kit and you have your piston rings and you just drop them in a cylinder that is fully glazed, then you find that your new piston rings drive all the oil down, and then they'll be scraping against what is basically a dry cylinder wall. And that's how you find that after a few months of driving the car, your car is smoking again. Not because you bought piston rings that are not quality, but because simple things like the engine wasn't honed when the mechanic went to work on it. So that's why for us here at Tunex, we normally just tell the client, look, if the engine is a full aluminium engine, we'd rather just drop a brand new engine in it. So for example, like the 1KR, if you come to us with the 1KR and this thing is got no compression, it's burning engine oil through the piston rings, we just tell you get a new engine. Right, so this one was a bit of a long one, but I just really wanted to give you guys some of the details when it comes to rebuilding your engine. So it's not a complete loss when you try to rebuild your engines. Here I'm just saying that for me, the success stories are not that much, and the failure stories actually outweigh the success stories. So my advice would always be, if you have major problems like a loss of compression, your engine is burning oil and it's an all aluminum engine, just go ahead and get yourself a new engine, put it in the car. It will be much cheaper. If you get yourself a shell, then you're going to be dealing with just moving parts, the major parts of the supporting parts for the engine onto the new engine, and then you're back on the road. But when it comes to my fellow mechanics, when you're going to do an overhaul on an engine, pay attention to the details, because these engines work at very high pressures. They are very fast moving parts working with very small spaces. So you need to pay attention when it comes to the machine shops and what they are supposed to be doing, so that you have a successful rebuild for your client. You don't want your clients to be coming back after 6 months and telling you that the engine is smoking again, just because you didn't know that you're supposed to have the cylinders honed before you put in the new pistons with the new piston rings. So I hope you guys learned something about overhauling engines, and of course I'm active in the comment section. You can leave your comments there, and until the next one, take care and drive safe.